In the status quo, criminals sentenced to life imprisonment without parole have no choice or option of the death penalty and are denied their freedom of choice. However, under our world, under our case, criminals with no choice of parole have that chance to get the solace they need and the relief and loss of burden. Our model is that prisoners on life sentence without parole are often the death penalty and have the choice to take up the offer or leave it. They can also request it while in prison. My points will include solace for victims, criminals, and resources. In this debate, we have to prove to you why having the death penalty benefits prisoners, society, and victims, as well as giving a chance. And as well as why giving a chance to them is better than none, and the opposition needs to prove how their world will reap as many benefits as ours. I would now like to move on to my substantive. Solace. Firstly, we have to recognize these prisoners as innately human, and therefore are extremely likely to succumb to guilt, fear, and regret. The violent and or concerning crimes often lead to such issues. These emotions can become extremely hard to bear in the long run, leading to depression and a futile sense of desperateness to end their suffering. To have been given the choice to end it all may be the sense of relief some prisoners desperately want. However, under the opposition side of the case, what do we get? What benefits are there? These humans in prison aren't even given a choice, even with no parole. We can also see the flip side of the coin, where the victim and family, who may have been suffering from trauma and unforgettable memories due to the fact that this prisoner may have committed traumatic acts. The chance that the person that has traumatized them could choose to die makes it easier for them to heal, and as well as giving them a sense of relief and moving on from the crime, which overall makes rehabilitation for them easier. I would now like to move on to my second point, resources. Keeping up and maintaining prisons are extremely costly and take up a lot of resources. The resources that can be used, these resources from the prisoners who have chosen to leave this world can be used in other areas to help needy people. Again, this also goes on to solace the criminals, knowing that even after their death, they can still atone and make life easier for other people as well as the general public. These people in the public would greatly benefit from more allocated resources. But what does the negating team bring? We, the affirmative, have at least given them a choice, but what are you going to do? Deny them of what possibly could be their release? I would also like to further emphasize that if we, the affirmative team, are called inhumane by the opposition due to the fact that we have given them the death penalty as a choice, I would like to emphasize that we are simply giving them choice due to not having any parole or chance of reintegrating into society out of prison. So, adjudicator and audience, ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to weigh these two sides. Who has explained and shown the benefits with the added option of a death penalty to these humans? We, the affirmative, which is why I am proud to affirm.
We believe that we should not offer criminals sentenced to life imprisonment without parole the option of death. Onto our framing and setup then. So why does our side stress the importance of life? We think that prisoners, even if they want to die, should not be able to do so. To add on, we think that for individuals who are sentenced to life imprisonment, they have done incredibly bad things, no doubt, and therefore should not be living with the rest of society, hence they are in prison for life, right? They're also stripped of every single right, like the right to autonomy, speech, etc., all except their right to live. But the death penalty is a step further in which they are stripped of every right, including their right to live. And so our side goes against the very idea of death penalty in the first place. The only instance where we believe that death penalty should be allowed is when the person is simply so dangerous where even in an isolated area or anywhere else, they pose a threat. This will be like with people with psychopathic tendencies, as they have never appreciated life in the first place. So prolonging this won't make a difference. On to our rebuttals then about to the previous speaker from the Gov side. So firstly, they stated something about the relief for prisoners. However, firstly, why are you allowing the prisoner to get what they want? They should not be given the right to autonomy, as I already stated, since life imprisonment is when they are stripped of every single right, including the right to autonomy, and the only right they maintain is the right to life. Okay, on to our second rebuttal. They stated something about resources and how when these criminals decide to choose suicide and the other option, the resources left over will be used for other means. However, we concede this harm, but we'd rather do this than waste their life and allow the prisoners to do what they usually do, right? So the role of the government, right? Morally, what would the government do? This leads on straight to our first argument about the difference between death penalty and life sentence. Panel, life is important. That is the basis of this argument. The life sentence is given to people that have committed horrible crimes, no doubt, and so all of their rights are taken away. But the only right that the prisoner is allowed to keep is their right to life and their right to live. The distinction between life imprisonment and death penalty reflects not only societal values and current status quo, but also moral principles. As I've stated in our framing, our side is against the death penalty in general. Therefore, not allowing them to commit suicide, even in the face of severe punishment, would align with the core belief in the status quo that our justice system will not stoop down to the same level of violence that it condemns. We believe we should be protecting the right to live and supporting it above anything else. So, Judge, if you take one thing away from this argument, it should be that side government now has the burden to prove two things: one, why the death penalty and life sentence should be correlated and merged, and two, why the prisoners should get the right of autonomy to choose between the two. This leads straight on to my next argument. On to our second argument about why we shouldn't give prisoners the choice to choose in the first place. The premise of this argument is that the act of giving a prisoner a chance to decide their fate and whether or not they should live or die is something that they should not be capable of in the first place. Panel: criminals who receive light sentences are not petty thieves. They have disrupted society, killed and murdered, kidnapped and done horrible things. This means that when you are sentenced to life in prison, you should be stripped of every right, like I continuously stated, except for the right to live. This also means that they are also stripped of the right to suicide. This is justified because everything that they have done means that they have no right to autonomy because of their actions, as they need to be monitored at all times. Life convicts also have disrespected life as a whole. They have ruined their life, murdering people and committing major crimes, and just undermined the importance of it. The point of a life sentence is not to rehabilitate them, as there is no choice in that matter, but to teach them, at least help them understand the value and importance of life, and that they shouldn't have just thrown it away. This will be expanded upon by our second speaker, but for now, very proud
Under our
to-
modern legislation, those who are incarcerated and placed on life sentence with no parole feel guilt, fear, and regret for the rest of their lives, meaning that if we keep them locked between the same four walls for the rest of their lives, we are, practically speaking, treating them more like objects than humans. We believe that it's not only inhumane and immoral, but in fact more sadistic if we do not give them the option of the death penalty. However, the opposition believes that there is virtually no harm to keeping these individuals in prisons for the rest of their lives. Before I continue with my case, I would like to state a few pieces of rebuttal. So the opposition comes out stating that whether or not you prolong a criminal's life, it doesn't matter, because some of them are psychopathic, and especially the people who are put on life sentence, they're probably psychopathic. Well, we believe that. We've got 4 responses to that. Number 1, we believe that no matter who you are, you should still have a right to bodily autonomy. Number 2, which relates to number 1, you should still have freedom of choice. Number 3, those who are psychopathic and have a life sentence is still quite a minority. And number 4, whether you keep a criminal, whether you give them the death, if you give them the death penalty, it still allows for retribution. And secondly, the opposition comes out saying that they question morally what the government should do in this case. Well, we have our response to this is that we believe no matter what kind of citizen you are, every prisoner should be given a right to death, and that the government has a very strong obligation to make sure this happens. And now onto my substantive. We believe that there are 2 main reasons for prison in this case: retribution and incapacitation. Number 1, retribution. This is the basic principle that the guilty are punished, and that victims of crimes have a peace of mind knowing that there won't ever be a way for these criminals to reach back to them. So retribution is one of the main reasons behind the existence of prisons, since it justifies why morally prisoners should be physically kept back. Number 2, incapacitation. In this case, this means that the offender is restrained from society and can't hurt others. So we benefit both incarcerated individuals by giving them a choice about their lives, taking in the fact that they should be either in prisons or given the death penalty. And we also benefit society, because now that the individual is incapacitated, they cannot reach any potential victims. So we believe that by giving criminals with a sentence to life imprisonment without parole, the option of the death penalty, it's much more humane and yet still completes all of what the society and criminals need, which is why we believe we should offer criminals sentenced to life imprisonment without parole the option to death penalty.
Judge, we've already won this debate from Sally because they failed to prove the 2 burdens that we have given them in this debate. Firstly, why death and being trapped in prison forever should be considered the same thing. And secondly, why would we give prisoners the choice to do this when they're supposed to be punished to not be allowed to choose anything except just be alive and regret the actions they have done? Never been prouder to oppose. Again, as I've just stated, Judge, they failed to respond to our burdens, which means that unless deputy can come up with answers to these questions, then we obviously would take this debate home, because by whip it'll be too late. But moving on to some rebuttals and straight responses before I move on to an extension. They talk about resources. But firstly, Judge, if the option of life imprisonment is still available in your world, this means that this benefit of theirs can be negated simply because of the fact that there will still be life imprisonment in your world. There will still be people who don't want to die because they're scared of death. They might be scared of what happens after death, etc., etc. There could be a multitude of reasons. This means that this benefit is at best minor, at most a wash, simply because of the fact that life imprisonment still exists in your world, meaning that if the prisoner still, I don't know, chooses to stay in jail, then it still kind of removes a lot of the benefits on government side, simply because of the fact that they'll still be alive, which means that the peace of mind could still, like, I don't know, be traumatized within some individuals, and it'll still be a waste. It'll still waste resources in order to keep this individual alive. But Judge, why do we have to keep these individuals alive? And I'd like to move on to my substantive about the frame about why life is so important in today's debate. Judge, government side, it seems to think that you can just waste life away. You can just throw it away. It's not relevant. It's not important, etc., etc. The reason why this is a philosophical debate, Judge, is because we question the importance of life in this debate. Yet government has no regard for this. They seem to think that, oh, well, life is it's totally not something that happens. It's a miracle that we were born. We are all unique, etc., etc. Now, life is none of those things. We should just throw it away simply because of the fact that this prisoner doesn't want to face the consequences of his actions, which goes back to Sally's point on how these prisoners should not be given the choice because they're just running away from the consequences. By killing themselves, this means that they don't want to spend the rest of their life in jail. Shouldn't we be punishing them rather than letting them get what they want? Wouldn't this be a worse state of mind for the individuals who suffered because of the actions of these criminals, that this individual got away with what they wanted to do, which was die? Which means that, Judge, you guys don't allow these individuals to have a peace of mind, nor do you respect life in general, because your side is the one that just denies it completely, that sacrifices it in exchange for something that the criminal is wanting, which is completely horrible to do. We should not be giving criminals the option to just like choose at this point of what they have done. Criminals have done horrible things, especially those who are sentenced with life imprisonment. Which is why, Judge, we believe that we shouldn't be giving these people the right to die. Because obviously, if you think about it, firstly, life is very important. It's a miracle that the gravity has been the exact amount it needs to be for life to exist on this planet. It's a miracle that every single one of our souls has existed in today's society in status quo, which is why I cannot understand or fathom how government side is willing to, for one person or one individual, to throw that all away, to let them take away this part, especially since the reason why we consider death penalty more of a severe punishment is because we strip the last most fundamental right of someone away from them, which is their life. Which is why when government side now has the burden to prove why we should allow, firstly, why life and life imprisonment and death penalty are the same, and why these prisoners should be given a choice, which they still have not responded to.
The opposition is living in a world in which criminals are cruelly and inhumanely treated, with scarcely any choice in their lives. These incarcerated people are being stripped of their rights, with the only option of suffering and withering away in prison, guilt-ridden. These people will almost never experience being treated like a decent human being after their life sentence, and to let them rot and diminish in prison is both extremely cruel and brutal. Implementing this policy would greatly aid the stakeholders. It would give them the freedom of choice to choose how they would live their life. Victims and victims' families would find it much easier to heal and to move on, knowing that their assaulters or attackers could never find a way back to them. Resources that would have been used to support the incarcerated prisoner while in prison can be reallocated into systems and fields where they would greatly benefit other people. To give these prisoners a way out of life where they would be inhumanely and ruthlessly treated would be beneficial to the whole of society. On to my rebuttal. I have found two themes in today's debate. The first theme is if these prisoners should have the choice to choose or not. The second theme is what will occur if they are in prison instead. On to the first theme. We see the opposition come out and say that these prisoners should not have the choice to choose because they should apparently be stripped of every right. This is extremely wrong and immoral. These prisoners are still humans. You can't automatically strip them of their human rights and thereby strip them of being a human being. They deserve to have a choice about how they will live their life and how they will die. This is true for two reasons. This is true for one reason. The first reason, this reason is that these prisoners are still human beings. They deserve to be treated humanely. They should not have zero rights except the right to live. This is unbelievably immoral and unethical to these criminals. You cannot live a life when you have no rights. There is simply no regard for the inhumane way in which these criminals will be treated. Onto my second theme. Onto the second theme, which is their burdens of proof. The opposition then states that their two burdens of proof is first, why isn't death and being trapped in prison forever the same thing? The second one is why we shouldn't give the prisoner the choice. Our response to this is that our response to the first one is that death and being trapped in prison forever is not the same thing. As our second speaker has brought in our case, even if both mean the same thing to society, which means that the prisoner can't reach them anymore as they're behind bars and locked up, it is certainly not the same for the prisoner because they will suffer in prison, whereas if they choose the death sentence, they will not suffer and live the rest of their life at guilt. The opposition states that life is precious, and for most people it is. However, it doesn't matter what our opinion on their life is. It matters how they view their life. This means that since they know themselves best, we should give them the basic human right in which they can choose how they will live their life or how they will die. The opposition is stripping prisoners who are still humans of their last human right. I have two pieces of miscellaneous rebuttal. Okay, I have one piece of miscellaneous rebuttal. The negative team claims that the point of a life sentence isn't to rehabilitate them. However, the point of being in prison is to rehabilitate them. It's to lock them away from the rest of society and to keep other people safe from these prisoners. But putting these prisoners in a life sentence where they aren't treated like humans is certainly not the point of prison, and it doesn't align with society's morals and values. To implement this policy, I have another piece of miscellaneous rebuttal. Also, the opposition greatly exaggerates the amounts of psychopaths and sociopaths out there in prison, as well as these criminals being inhumane, when in fact it is the extreme minority, and everyone knows that. Despite being prisoners, they're still human, and you must recognize that in this debate. To implement this policy would be to enable thousands of victims and families to heal and live their lives a bit easier. Incarcerated prisoners would be given a choice to live humanely a life that would only entail suffering and misery behind bars. Hence, it is essential that we offer criminals sentenced to life imprisonment without parole the option of the death penalty. I am proud to.
And the opposing side in this debate talked about how if this criminal looked at their actions, even when they choose to die, will they feel any regret? So that here we think that the goal of the government at this point is not whether or not the future of the criminal is good or bad. And in reality, we should talk about the and that because of how there's no like real future for the criminal in the first place, we should rather look about the role of the government and what they should do, which is why our side won this debate. So here, firstly, the other side talked about this will give a sense of relief towards the individual as they're escaping from their actions. So here, we think that these people should not be able to have the option to do this in the first place because of how this there are two very different things: the option to commit suicide that like the other side is fighting for, and life imprisonment. Firstly, and I'll talk about this later. So here, why do we not want this in the first place? You think that the other side is saying in the world, and it's simply saying is a practical benefit on our world as well, as we think that these criminals, what we are looking at in this debate, are people who have murdered like more than one person, that taking the freedom of life, freedom of choice, and every single other freedom of another individual. And why should these people be given the freedom to live their life and continue on and choose what they should do? We think that this is simply absurd, and that if a person has committed these actions that have gotten rid of the meaning of life for another individual, this is still justified in this debate, and that the government should be able to take away complete every single right of this individual. And a short clarification before I add on. So we're not saying that, we never said that most of all the criminals receiving life imprisonment is a psychopath. We're saying that they're the minority and they should be the exception to receive the death penalty. Again, we stress that they are the minority. So to add on, we think that this relief is not something that will actually exist in the debate and matter as well. So why is this? Firstly, these criminals will not even feel relief, and this is likely as these people, no matter how sane they are, are currently not really in a state of mind where they choose to when they choose to make this decision. The reason for this is that these people have gone through so many things like trauma, etc. And secondly, to add on, is a part of human evolution that a living being wants to continue on living. So if this human, when they decide and they want to like end his own life, why should this right and this opinion even be valued in the first place? We think that this is not, and this is simply absurd. And secondly, to add on, well, we think that the opinion of this person is not really important in debate, and we think that the criminal themselves is the least important stakeholder here as well. So and also we think that this relief is also not really important in this debate, as when they choose to commit suicide, their life is gone, and that it doesn't matter at all, and that this relief has no real benefit that will be given to the person or any other stakeholder in this debate as well. So moving on to our team's first clash on should the government be justified to allow the criminal to commit suicide. So here, this clash, so Judge, we have continued pushing points that they should not be allowed the right to choose. They deserve to reflect and regret their life choices rather than just end their life and avoid the burden of doing so. The other side is fighting for a world where the prisoner, who should be gotten rid of all the freedom of life and etc., is simply escaping from everything that they have done. They're just saying bye-bye to everything, and that's not something that we want in this debate. And the thing is, Judge, the burden too in this part of the punishment and the consequences, and therefore simply because of one point, we automatically take this clash. But let's look at other points that we have stated. Sally already said that the justice system in the current school should not stoop down to the same level of violent contempt, and also we said that they are inhumane and so are all of these prisons as well. So moving on to our team's second clash on which side serves the correct role of the punishment. So here the other side talked about the retribution and that this will help the person, the victim, and rehabilitation. So we don't get what rehabilitation means in this debate, and in both worlds these people will not go back to society. They will not be rehabilitated. They're gonna live their lives in prison on our world, or in their world they'll simply just die. Okay, so this means that in their world rehabilitation is not something that is happening, and then in our world we think that rehabilitation, or like the person actually like we think that our role is actually much better here, and that we think that retribution is not given. We think that retribution actually is better in our world because in their world, this person is just running away from everything that they've committed as well. So due to all of these reasons, our status on this.
Judge, we win this debate for two reasons. Firstly, because the government side has not proven why you should be allowed to end your life, which both sides should agree that is important, and you should be allowed to end your life versus being punished, being actually sent to prison, and because of the fact that we shouldn't be giving prisoners the choice to kill themselves in the first place, simply because they have deprived so many other people, probably most likely, of the right to live. They have destroyed other people's ability, they have destroyed other people's minds, other people's mental health, etc., etc. Which is why we shouldn't be giving any choice to these individuals and no autonomy whatsoever. They keep pushing this idea about it being inhumane after we rebut the idea. After we rebut the idea that after we say that these prisoners shouldn't be given the choice in the first place, they push this idea of this being inhumane and a horrible thing to do. But Judge, as Ryan has stated, doesn't this apply to like every single prison? It's not like the quality of a life sentence in prison is going to be significantly worse than one of a 20 years sentence prison, etc., etc. We don't buy this point simply because firstly, we're fine with them being stuck in a box all day, because as Sally and I have both mentioned, this prisoner deserves to be punished. We don't understand why, and they have not proven this yet, why these prisoners should be allowed to just run away from all of their problems, run away from all the bad things they have done in society, especially since government side must concede to the idea that these people are killing themselves simply because they do not want to face the consequence of dying in prison, of spending their entire life in prison, which means that, Judge, if people actively take the death sentence because they don't want to spend time in prison, this means that the punishment is effective because it is effective in incentivizing regret and no relief, as Ryan has stated, which is why obviously we don't care if these prisons are firstly not inhumane, and secondly we're fine with treating these prisoners like not that greatly because obviously they have committed several other crimes. They have committed crimes to the point in which they are no longer allowed to be part of society, which means that don't buy their points, Judge. They've not proven our burdens, especially since when they rebut to the idea that, oh, well, death penalty and life sentence obviously different because life sentence is worse. That is not true, Judge. There is a reason why the court believes that death penalty is obviously worse than life sentence. Why? Because life sentence at least allows you to keep the right to live, whereas they go on and go on about how this is such a horrible thing for the criminal prisoners, you know, blah blah blah. This will like harm you, like etc. etc. Well, we've already proven to you that this isn't inhumane, and we're okay with doing this because they need to suffer the punishment. Whereas death penalty is in the scenario in which the person has become so inherently dangerous that they cannot exist in the first place, which is why I've never been
The
proud
death
to
penalty
oppose.
is not option for criminals sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and they're deprived of their freedom of choice in the opposition's world. But in today's environment, but in what we want as the affirmative team, offenders who are denied the option of parole have the opportunity to receive the comfort, relief, and release from responsibility that they require through our world. At the start of our debate, we placed a burden into this debate where we, the proposition, have to shower benefits to prisoners, victims, and society. We have proved this by stating that prisoners have their freedom of choice respected, victims are able to get closure from the fact their attacker may never come around again, and society receives extra resources for lacking areas. However, what has negative proved to you? They have not shown many long-term benefits as we have, and refuse to treat these prisoners as humans. I have identified one main recurring issue throughout the debate. Do they deserve this? The negative team states, no, they don't deserve this choice because they did horrible crimes, they don't deserve this choice. We, the affirmative, has stated, well, they have done horrible crimes, but just because they're criminal doesn't mean they're not human. I would now like to move on to why we have won, of which I have 4 reasons. Firstly, they state near the start that these criminals, these psychopaths, don't deserve a final choice. This is pretty clear and emphasized until the third speaker starts to contradict himself and agree with our side of the case by stating, yes, they are the minority, so they don't really matter in this debate and should have never been brought up. This is a very clear contradiction, but not the only one noted in this debate, which moves me on to my next reason. They also mentioned that even if they want to die, they shouldn't be able to. And then they later state that they shouldn't die because otherwise we're stripping every right from them. And if you ask anyone in this room, including you, adjudicator, both of these are pretty clear contradictions, right? They render the negative team's points useless, which showed further why our side of the case is ultimately better. The negative team also continuously denied the fact that these prisoners, and yes, they've committed crimes, but that doesn't change the very obvious fact they're human. They have been denying these prisoners of their choice. This has been continuously stated by my team on multiple occasions. However, the opposition has simply stated, no, they're not human, and we're fine with them being in a box all day. Isn't that a little bit inhumane? I would also like to point out the fact that when the opposition pointed out that they are killing themselves and they don't deserve this, and they shouldn't be able to do this, I would like to use an analogy of smoking and vaping. It's really their choice. You can't deter them from making their own choice that they made with a valid reason. The opposition also states that incarcerated individuals which have been put on life sentence do not deserve the option of death sentence. So clearly the opposition doesn't really care about the citizens, which explains under their world, prisoners don't even get a right. However, they have not even considered whether or not these criminals deserve it and whether or not they're human. Prisoners are also going to run away from all the... They also stated that prisoners are going to run away from all the issues if we offer them the death sentence. However, no, because this is just simply a way of them relieving their burden, releasing their burden, trying to atone for their sins and issues that they have caused during their life, which is why I am proud to affirm. Thank you.